You're looking at what the Detroit Lions did. My first thought goes to the offensive line was a strength of this team. It was the unquestioned strength of this team. Have they done enough to continue it being that way?
Absolutely. I think that you got a little bit of a regression from Graham Glasgow and Taylor Decker in some ways. I don't think his regression was as much as people played it up to be, but it is something to pay attention to going forward. But when you look at how they drafted, they absolutely covered the trenches. In terms of guard position, they went out, they got Frazier, they went out and they got Tate Ratledge. Those are two guys that one is going to be probably a starter for you going forward, and the next guy is going to be arguably your center of the future, because I think in a lot of ways they want to, kind of versify his game to where he can play center as well, because that's something that Frank Ragnow and Graham Glasgow have been able to do. They want that versatility in their offensive line. But overall, when you look at what they've done, if you also add Christian Mahogany and Giovanni Manu to that mix, which we don't know a lot about, but we do think that the Lions have big plans for these guys. I think they're pretty well suited for the offensive line to be a strength going forward. Absolutely.
Goodness gracious, man, because this was a time where it wasn't even a question. It was just the undoubted top unit on the Detroit Lions, and I believe more so than ever this season it's going to be important for them to actually maintain that perch, even though we see the Detroit Lions taking a step forward. Do you still have them as that unquestioned, or do you think that there's some of these other units they have that are challenging for that top spot?
I think that safety tandem is arguably the best in the league. They can compete with that offensive line. I think our receiving core is very much slept on. I would put them towards the top, but they wouldn't be the best. But I don't think they get enough recognition. And our running back room, arguably the best in the league with Jahmyr Gibbs, and we can't forget David Montgomery, man. He is going to add a lot to this offense, although a lot of people feel like this is Gibbs' time. Like, is Gibbs going to be the starter going forward? Is he going to get the bulk of the touches going forward under a John Morton offense? That's the biggest question. But as a tandem, you can't really name a lot of tandems better than him in football. You can't.
Not at all. Not at all. What up, though, that dude, Justin?
See, KG, you're spin facts, but spin too many facts, because of the ones I had. I had the safeties. You pulled that one out. I was like, all right, I'll transition to the running backs. And then he's like,
as a crew, let's set that, man. Is the offensive line still the unquestioned number one?
It definitely is the unquestionable best unit because of how deep they are. Like, we're talking about now, we got guys who are backups like Ratledge and Manu and Frazier, guys who have pretty high floors in the NFL to at least be starters. In terms of Manu, his ceiling is more higher than his floor. So, but I think that there is the most depth in that unit for sure. I think that the receivers, there's a case, but I think the running backs and the safeties case is both better than the wide receivers, unless Isaac Tesla turns into what are they calling him? They had a really cool nickname for him.
Really?
Sheesh.
I don't remember. I saw it on TikTok. I'll have to go find it.
Because I do believe that the wide receiver room is the one that is kind of the dark horse candidate. I do. You talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown as one of your team's leaders, the ascension of Jamison Williams. And then you got a bevy of players like Tim Patrick, who he's going to be much more comfortable this season. He seems like he's in a much better headspace this year, or at least through the season with the Detroit Lions. And you're talking about Isaac Tesla and whatever else they choose to do, because we're also talking about Sam Laporta from the tight end position too. Yeah, I believe that is the dark horse candidate to be one of the best.
You almost forget about Sam Laporta.
We've had many conversations where I realized we didn't even mention his name, where we're talking about playmakers or pass catchers for the squad, and it is exactly like I see in the chat. I just saw it passing by, but they said, the Lions have a historic offense. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because the other comment that I saw, which puts this in perspective for the second half of the conversation, is they didn't do enough to build the defense. And that's what we're going to talk about, the realistic expectations of Hutch and Aleem, because you dropped the bar yesterday. When you do look at the makeup of some of these defensive lines, they're not even constructed, in my opinion, with the potential that the Lions present right now, even though we don't have the bookend, edge rusher that we would want with Aiden Hutchinson.
But we got 3 out of 4. And that's what people need to realize. We are like monstrous in the middle. When you add Aleem McNeil, when you add DJ Reader, and you look at some of the picks that they've made, I mean, Roy Lopez is going to contribute. Tyreek is going to come in and contribute early in his first year. They are absolutely like stacked in the middle. And you have one of the best premier pass rushers in this league in Aiden Hutchinson. I think you could get by with 3 out of 4. I really do. Especially if most of the defense is healthy.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually was about to say I'm ready to put the D-line up there in that conversation. They probably are the last unit of those units, but in terms of I'd take the
talk to me.
I'd take the D-line depth over the linebackers. I'd take the D-line depth over the tight ends. I would take the D-line depth over the corners. I think that the D-line depth is actually really strong. And if they're able to come back off injury, and I know that's an if, this D-line has proven that they can be productive. The issue with Marcus Davenport is his injury history. It's not his play on the field. When he is on the field, he is effective. He is a perfect pairing for Hutchinson if he can stay healthy. The only reason people want an edge is so we have a safety blanket if he gets hurt again. Hutchinson, arguably the best defensive end in the NFL.
Yeah.
DJ Reader, Pro Bowler. Aleem McNeil, Pro Bowler. Roy Lopez, solid depth piece. Tyreek Williams, high floor draft pick.
Levi Ozarika.
High ceiling, high floor and a high ceiling for Tyreek.
You saw Mekhi Wingo come on a little bit at the end of the year. You got Muhammad. Like, we have depth there. Like, there are guys, and if everyone stays, I think everyone is so scared of last season. And everyone is just like holding on to this false narrative that the injuries are going to be like they were last year. Like, it's not going to be like that every year. Like, it's not like that's just an unlucky season. There hasn't been a season for any team in the last 5 years that I can think of that dealt with as many injuries as the Lions dealt with last year.
It's still no one.
And they still went 15-2. Like, that proves the quality of this team. Yep. And you want to talk about the Eagles? You know, they had 21 of 22 day one starters playing in the Super Bowl.
You're right, and that
Spinny
was
said all the time,
bro. That was the thing that we continued to hear, not just here with Spinny, but also on the national broadcast. And from a depth perspective, they also the Miles Adams, Pat O'Connor, Levi O. You know, they're going to have depth. You know, when you lay it out that way, realistically, what we're talking about with the Lions isn't do they need to add more for talent. It's really, are they going to be available? And it's the best ability we talk about often with these teams. The Detroit Pistons in their rebuild, it was thwarted because they brought in some vets who could play, but they couldn't play games. When they were available, they did well, and when they weren't, which was a lot of games, it just didn't fit. So you're not getting any type of chemistry or cohesion. We saw the Pistons this year, just like we've seen several times over with all these teams that are winning now. When you're able to get that cohesion, when you do have the right vets on this squad, man, this thing, it tends to work itself out more than not. And we've seen that happen to historic rates with the Pistons and the Lions.
Do you remember the conversations we were having in September, October, and part of November when we were talking about this defense being a top 5 unit in the NFL? And that's how well they were playing. Like, do we forget the fact that the Lions were down by 20 points against the Texans and we shut them out in the second half?
How often did we say that the last year's defense, even without Aiden Hutchinson, was better than the previous years? I heard that from Chat Family, socials, and including other media outlets and such.
And that's with all the injuries. Like, you're talking about adding back Aiden Hutchinson, Amik Robertson's coming back. Like, we add DJ Reed to that mix. Like, there's so much more talent on this defense. Like, now, if you compare it to, like, I'd love to, for one of these days, put a side-by-side comparison of our playoff defense versus our projected day one defense for this year. And I want people to actually see the visualization of how much better this team is going to be. Even just the depth on the defensive line. We actually have legitimate depth pieces there. Like, there was no one really behind Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader last year. Now you have 2 guys who are serviceable that you can drop in there at any time and know that they're going to give you quality snaps in Roy Lopez and Tyreek Williams. And that's something you couldn't say last year. You couldn't say the cornerback room goes 4 or 5 deep because of the emergence of Ennis Rakestraw. You couldn't say that
I'm actually excited for the linebacking room just getting healthy.
Yeah.
They had some dogs there, and they showed a deep rotation there. Especially when you consider Malcolm Rodriguez and what he was able to do. And I like the fact that the linebackers are versatile. Mm-hmm. Malcolm Rodriguez adds something to that line. I'm focusing on him because we all know what we expect out of Anzalone and out of Jack Campbell. And I expect a big step forward from Jack Campbell, not just being a guy who we saw take a nice step from year 1 to year 2, but a guy from not just what we consider like Dan Campbell. He can be the green dot. He can be the leader. I want to see him be that guy.
Yeah.
I want to see him be that alpha while Alexander Anzalone is still here on this squad. I think it's very important for him as a potential future of this linebacker of this team, leader of this team, unquestioned leader, to take that step while he's still here. It's something about earning that respect. Dog to dog, having your OG look you in the eyes and say, you know what, you earned it.
Yes, sir.
And when you talk about the makeup of the linebackers that we have on this team, they're still relatively young, and we're still hoping to get so much more out of them from potential. This is where I do believe that if you see Jack Campbell reach that level, this whole room, especially with our guy KG as the new defensive coordinator, shout out Calvin Shepard, that's why I expect a lot out of these linebackers. I really do. And I do think that when I started thinking about this, because I first started at the D-line, and I was like, let's talk about Aiden Hutchinson and Lee McNeil. Then I started realizing they're pretty decent. And I went to the linebackers, and we had already talked about what the secondary is looking like, specifically those safeties.
Yeah.
Then we know that the running backs, they might have an opportunity to be the top 5 individually, top 5 running backs in the NFL, and as a tandem, the best. Jahmyr Gibbs has a shot at being the best running back in all of the NFL, who I believe he already is. I don't care. Argue with your mama if you disagree. I don't have the time for it. Got a flight after the show.
Right.
So it's just like, I'm just being
Talk
like,
your shit,
but that's why I started looking at this thing, and I was like, you know what? Maybe some of the things that we argue about, maybe some of the things that we worry about, maybe they're confounded. Because when I look across this roster, there's a bevy of all pros, Pro Bowlers, stars, underrated players, young players with high potential, and some rookies who, when you look at these specific picks, I saw somebody in the chat say, I like all of these guys that we drafted. That's why I was like, man, this is getting a lot more difficult now to even pick out which unit or position group is the biggest and the baddest on the Lions.
Yeah, and I was told the Lions had an F draft. But anyway, and that's a good point about the linebackers, because Derek Barnes went down last year. You didn't have Rodrigo last year. It got to a point where we were signing guys off of the street, essentially, like Quan Alexander, Jamal Adams, to come in and play linebacker for this team. And you still got serviceable snaps from those guys as well. So that just tells you right there that your coaching is up to par. But also, a lot of your reserves and guys that you didn't expect to get a lot of playing time that did get playing time, that only makes them better as well, because they have that in-game experience now. So now your reserves are just as good. Well, I won't say just as good, but they are up to par and on a level that if your starter goes down, they can hold down the fort while, your starter is out. So I think this team is in a very good position, and the injuries, people just need to realize, man, like 22 guys on an injured list that's a lot, especially even over the course of a 17-game season. That is a lot, and you were missing a lot of key guys at key positions. Now that you're getting some of those guys back, and you seem to have drafted well, you drafted for need, I think this team is in a very good position to still be one of the dominant defenses in this league. I do.
What up, Dodger?
I'm sorry. I'm laughing at chat. There's so many funny things going on in chat. First of all, shout out Wheezy. I think he's being sarcastic when he says this. But Justin, there isn't some 10-sack guy on paper that people can predict. Well, actually, Marcus Davenport had 9.5 sacks in his career in one season, and Aiden Hutchinson last year was on pace for over 20. Big so there's actually 2 guys on this team that you can look at.
So you tell me that Aiden Hutchinson was still doing this thing even after Davenport went down?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Isn't that crazy?
Oh.
Still supposed to lead the NFL in sacks? Still led the NFL in sacks 4 weeks after he got hurt? That guy?
Yeah.
That guy who's coming back to the team? And like Neil says, the guy that no other team that's competing for a championship has, a guy with 15-plus sacks?
That's a good time to segue then. We'll say what up, though, to some friends. We'll get back and we'll talk realistic expectations for Aiden Hutchinson as defensive line. We got to put our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can either go, you can include a full unit or a position group. So if you just want to single out the safeties, or if you think the safeties plus the cornerbacks, they make that strong enough to say, you know what? No, their secondary is number one, or number two, or number three. We're gonna go through it. We're gonna go through a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I saw somebody ask, do coaches count? Sure. Why not? But what friends you want to say what up though to JB Smooth?
We got something about Lady James, but first let me tell them about some super chats that we got going on. Once again, shout out to everyone sending in super chats. My bad, Dante. I know I slipped up on this one, but he said, "Man, what happened? I hope the Pacers sweep the Cavs." Damn.
I hate the Pacers.
$5 from Burns. Shout out. He said, "Well, I'm feeling a bit better after seeing the Celtics choke away a 15-point lead to the Knicks." I don't even know how that's possible. It's actually a 20-point lead as well, too. And $1.99 from Ed O'Neill said, "A lot of bad QBs Lions play, not the same this year." So
I ain't gonna say that they defended Jason Tatum, but